If, in fact, Senator Cruz does not agree with the things that were done, with the deceit that was carried out, then I would expect that he would do something about it.
I think what he did was a fraud, and what he did with the voter violation statement, looking like it came from a government, was a fraud, and it's a disgrace to the electoral process.
Donald Trump and Ben Carson accusing rival Ted Cruz of using unfair tactics. But some here say complaining will not help you win, and they have proof from the private sector. Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth McDonald in for David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. Rich, you say the business world, it does have a lesson for these presidential candidates. So what is it?
Well, sure. The number one strategic job of any business is to figure out their unfair advantage in the marketplace and exploit it for all they can. And like a sports team or an army or any business, as you're doing that, you're going to make mistakes. Elbows are going to fly, and you move on. Look, the market will discipline you. In the case of Ted Cruz, he's going after Christian voters. If they find this out of bounds, they will punish him.
Bruce, do you agree with Rich?
I don't know. I mean, and you know, I'm from Iowa, so and I participated in the caucuses. And back in the day, a Mondale delegate referred to me as a wine and cheese Democrat, and I didn't drink wine, start drinking wine until I was in my 30s. but back to this.
That's unusual.
It is. But I don't think it's okay to do what it takes to do, because they basically, these are caucus rules, and they're run by the parties, and I think it sets a bad precedent. It sort of reminds me of, like, in the drug industry, they do what it takes to get a drug approved in a smaller population, and then once it gets out into clinical trials, you find problems. And I think that's the case with Cruz. The broader population is not happy with this.
What do you think, Steve? You know, businesses do this. Is it okay for candidates to do things like this?
Well, in terms of what happened in Iowa, not Cruz took on a statement, but Ben Carson made that looked like he might withdraw. So I don't want to defend Cruz, but you had that ambiguity there. In terms of business, you within the rules, you go for what you can. Steve Jobs, for example, went to Xerox PARC back in the late 1970s in that research lab, saw it became the mouse. He realized its potential. Xerox didn't. He ran with it. If you see an advantage, you take it, as long as you don't break the rules of the law. And that way, you not only do good for yourself, but you do good for society as a whole. We owe a lot to Steve Jobs.
All right, so, John, you know, here's what Ben Carson is upset about with the dirty tricks he alleges. He's saying that the Cruz campaign called precinct captains in Iowa and said, you know what, Ben Carson's dropping out. Vote for Ted Cruz instead. Instead, Ben Carson apparently was just going to get some rest and relaxation in Florida. He wasn't dropping out. So is it unfair or fair game?
Well, okay, maybe it is unfair, but let's face it, politics attracts incredibly vain people who lust for the power to allocate the resources created by others. So, of course, it's going to be a dirty business. Why are Trump and Carson surprised? If they shouldn't be running for president if they didn't expect it to be like this.
Well, Mike, you've got an example, I think, from pro sports, right?
Well, it just made me think of the 60s before the AFL and NFL merged. And I remember during the draft, you had the different leagues hiding players so the other league wouldn't get a chance to talk to them and draft them. So I think a lot of this stuff goes on. I think, like John says, more of it goes on in politics. If this did happen, what Cruz should have done was fired those involved.
All right, so that's an interesting point, just fire them. I mean, I think the business world would do the same if they found immorality or unethical stuff. But, Sabrina, do you think it's okay to do whatever it legally takes to win in business and in politics?
Well, yes, I mean, to some extent, Liz, of course. I mean, look, like everyone has said, the job of a business or of a candidate is to get votes or to get customers. But the flip side of that coin is that you have to get new customers. And I don't think Bernie Madoff is getting any new customers right now, right? And so I think for the GOP especially, one thing they need to keep in mind is there are simply more Democratic voters out there. They are going to have to persuade some of those soft Democrats to come over to their side.
Right.
And if they are viewed as too dirty and if they are viewed as too sort of salacious, then perhaps they're not going to be successful in that effort.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, we know, Rich, that Congress ranks right down there with car dealers, right? So let's bring it down to in terms of public trust, let's bring it down to the taxpayer level. I mean, it's about cynicism. You know, we don't want that to happen in our electorate. So on the taxpayer level, are these moves good like that, good or bad for taxpayers to win this way?
Good or bad for taxpayers, will come down to what tax programs we get from these people. And I wish they would spend less time whining and complaining about relatively trivial infractions and get down to the business of talking about how they would govern and talk about real economic policies that would move the country forward.
Steve, here's the thing when, you have a dirty tricks kind of allegations come in. We've seen that in campaigns before, right? We've seen in the Kennedy, Nixon campaign. We certainly saw in prior campaigns as well with those allegations. What do you think the reaction is to taxpayers to things like this?
Well, the taxpayers, i.e. the voters, don't like it. But in terms of the business side, Liz, the thing to keep in mind is some of the things that people hate about business today, like drug pricing and the like, come from government regulation. The FDA, for example, makes it extremely difficult to get competing drugs on the market in a timely fashion. So when these guys buy a company, jack up the price 10,000%, normally in a true free market, you get competitors swarming all over it, but government regulation stands in the way. In the true free markets, if you do something wrong, you will be punished.
All right, here's the thing, John. For maybe the message for Carson and Trump is in the business world is, you know what, these things happen all the time. We're just going to bullet right ahead and just ignore it. And we're going to stick to our game plan. And, yeah, what they did is unethical. It's really bad. But we're going to stick to our game plan. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think Rich hits on a very important point that markets ultimately work these things out. And if you're seen as playing dirty or if you're seen as being dishonest, it's probably going to play out in voting patterns. More broadly, if people despise politicians, I think that's good. That's good for the taxpayer. We won't allow them to do as much.
Well, we saw it with the Patriots, right, Mike? They've went under, that Deflategate scandal, and they're still working their way out from under that, right?
Well, Tom Brady has prevailed so far in court, and quite frankly, I agree with that. And I take my sign from Ronald Reagan. He was continually attacked for years, all through the 60s and 70s, often by Republicans, the establishment Republicans. But he stuck to his message, and he ultimately prevailed and was arguably the greatest president we've had over the last 50 years. And I think that that's what these candidates should do, stick to their message.
All right, Sabrina, I'm going to give you the final word. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, and I think Rich is onto this too, that in fact sort of people are tuning into this election in greater numbers than ever before, but at the same time they're turned off. I think it was 60% of voters are saying that they want the candidates to be talking about the issues. They want them to get to the important points. So I think to Rich's point, they want them to do their job, right?
Yeah, for once do their job, right? Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, you guys. Up next.